Dash Martin at Abraham Lincoln High School. I teach English. This is a 12th grade class, and we were covering Hamlet's use of figurative language in his to be or not to be soliloquy. Probably my power card, no problem.
Okay, do it one more time. That was good though, so go for it.
Dash Martin, I'm at Abraham Lincoln High School. I teach 12th grade English, and we are covering Hamlet's use of figurative language in his to be or not to be soliloquy.
Perfect, cool. Okay, first question is, how does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge? What was taught before the lesson and what will come after it?
Okay, so immediately before today, we worked on just trying to modernize Shakespeare's language. They did a translation exercise where they had the original Shakespearean text, and they tried to turn that into modern English so that they could focus more on the analogies today, the figurative language, the metaphors, instead of struggling as much with the language. More broadly, we've done collaborative annotation exercises throughout the school year, so they're familiar with that. This was a modified version of what we normally do, in that they were given more explicit instructions. Normally with collaborative annotations, it's really they're just transferring annotations they've made on texts onto a piece of chart paper and kind of riffing off of each other's annotations. Today they were asked to focus on specific portions of the text that they'd prepared for on Friday. Going forward, they're going to use what they gained today to write a paragraph analyzing that figurative language, and ultimately they'll be doing a writing task in which they wrestle with the ambiguities throughout the play and analyze how Shakespeare is using ambiguities both in figurative language and in plot and character development to express some sort of meaning. So.
Good. Is the text used in the lesson part of a sequence of texts designed to build skills and knowledge? If so, give an example of other texts that form this sequence.
Yeah, not thematically related, but throughout the year we've been wrestling with difficult texts, high-level texts, and doing a lot of the same techniques with those texts. As I said, collaborative annotation is something that we've done over and over and over again. Just annotation itself is a skill that they didn't have at the beginning of the year, which they're starting to develop. As far as Hamlet compared to other texts we've looked at, it's a bit removed from other things we've done, although many of the techniques, such as analyzing figurative language, are kind of common throughout the year.
So we are moving on to standards. Talk about the standards targeted in the lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard?
Yeah, let me check my notes for a second.
Okay, I'm gonna take a pause here.
Okay.
Do you want me to read the question again?
Yeah, sure, one more time.
Okay, so talk about the standards targeted in the lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard?
Okay. So there are two particular reading standards we focused on, R1 and R4. R1 says cite thorough textual evidence in support of analysis. So as I was going around, I kept trying to get students to substantiate their answers, look back at the text. Even in the do now, I sought to push them to explain why the particular language that Shakespeare used created the meaning that they said it did, instead of just being satisfied with, well, this is kind of what I thought it meant. The second, R4, basically says analyze an author's use of things like figurative language. So kind of the whole point of the lesson was them analyzing, what were the deeper meanings that were being expressed, how did the nuances of language complicate those deeper meanings. And that's something that we're going to have to continue. It's Shakespeare's difficult by itself, but then when you're really looking at that level of analysis, it's pushing a lot of the students. So we're going to have to come back to it throughout the week.
Which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplifies?
One moment.
Sure.
Okay, well, in core action 3, there are a number of things that this touched upon. One, the students are being asked to really wrestle with a difficult text and a difficult way of looking at that difficult text. Additionally, the collaborative annotation gives the students, well, both parts of the lesson gave the students an opportunity to talk with each other and work out meaning together. The first part of the discussion where they were reviewing Friday's work and getting absentees up to speed, I asked a number of clarifying questions that were based on the answers that I received on Friday, in the hopes that they can go a little bit deeper, expand their answers, and make their answers more text-based. During the collaborative annotation part, the whole idea behind collaborative annotation is that the students are interacting with, not only with the text, but with each other's responses to the text and looking at what other students have to say. The difficulty of the analysis and the text itself, I find pushes the students to talk to each other and seek help from each other and clarification from each other. So I hope that came across.
Okay, so now we are moving to the shifts.
Mm-hmm.
Discuss how this lesson illustrates the shifts required by the CCSS.
Well, I think in the past, a lot of this stuff I would have given to the students, told to the students. I've had, the shifts require more of guiding questions rather than answering their questions or having them answer your questions. It's like trying to give them enough scaffolding where they can make meaning on their own. And so it's difficult as a teacher to kind of let them wrestle with it because it takes a lot longer. You have to be more flexible. For instance, today we didn't get to the writing activity that I wanted to because they needed more time to make meaning out of the text and understand the figurative language before they could write about the figurative language.
You went into this a little bit, but let's see. So how did you teach the content of this lesson prior to the CCSS? What is the same and what is different?
Okay. So yeah, before the Common Core shift, it would be a lot more teacher-centered, probably a lot more notes, a lot more of me explaining. I mean, explaining under Common Core is kind of a last resort. You want the students to struggle and struggle and struggle and eventually make meaning, and the teacher becomes more of a facilitator, trying to find the right questions that don't give too much away, so that the students can discover those meanings on their own, and also letting students interact with each other more to try to get multiple perspectives on a text.
How did you support all students in working with grade level text? For example, how do you provide scaffolding for students below grade level so they can read grade level?
Okay. So a lot of that work went into the previous day's lesson during the translation exercise. Some students were given a lot of the soliloquy pre-printed, and they had to then, it was cut up into strips, and they had to rearrange that to match up with the original Shakespeare. A lot of the groups then had portions of the text removed, where they had to, portions of the translation removed, where they had to come up with their own translations, and also by organizing the groups in such a way where a stronger student is there to help a student who might be struggling. I have a lot of former ESL students in here who might actually understand the techniques, but just are struggling with the language. And so a more advanced student can come up with synonyms or ways to explain, you know, what the words themselves mean. I gave every group actually got guided questions today based on their answers from Friday, where I saw groups kind of missing something, or maybe just not going as deep as I would like them to. I created questions that would guide them to that depth or guide them to a more correct interpretation of that question. And I try to provide that scaffolding kind of on a need-to-know basis. Like if a student can handle it on his own or her own, then I'm going to withhold it. And if I see them struggling, then I'll provide a little bit more.
How do you know the students were able to successfully respond to the text-dependent questions and tasks with precision?
Well, I guess it's a two-part answer. One, just looking at the annotations that they made and listening to the discussions that they were having conversations with them as I was going around and checking their annotations. But the second part is I don't think they're quite there yet. We're going to have to come back to it tomorrow and go a little bit deeper into it and clarify their meaning. And then when I will really know for certain that they've got it is when they're able to write those paragraphs analyzing his various uses of figurative language.
What did you do for students who did not acquire the literary skills addressed in this lesson?
Mm-hmm. Give me a second.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
So the first thing I did is, as I was coming around, if I saw someone didn't get it, I tried to point them at particular words and ask them to explain those individual words to me, and then ask them why might Hamlet be doing this. Again, we'll come back to it tomorrow and go a little bit deeper. We'll ask them more clarifying questions, ask them to look at it again, partner them with people who seem to have a grasp of it, to see if they can help turnkey that knowledge and that understanding. That's kind of it.
Which behaviors from Core Action 3 did the students best exemplify?
I think the kind of collaborative discussion, the interaction between students. They rely on each other a lot for help, but additionally, you know, just relying on the text and looking at the text, we've gotten away from what I feel like it means, and more like what can the text prove.
So when you were walking around the room today, was there something that surprised or delighted you with the work they were doing?
Something that surprised or delighted me. Well, one particular student in the back who is a very hard worker, but he's only been in the country for a couple of years and sometimes struggles with the language. When I came around, I saw that his answer was spot on, that his interpretation of his portion of the text really expressed the surface meaning, but also kind of like the complexity of that particular use of figurative language. So that was nice to see. Normally he needs a bit more time, but he kind of got it right off the bat. So.
reflecting on the lesson, what worked well and what might you do differently?
Mm. I would like to have more time. I'd like to have a longer class period. I think it's really difficult to jigsaw successfully in a 45-minute class. So I think that could have gone smoothly. There's also a day with a lot of absentees, so we had to kind of rework the groups on the fly, and that kept me working on those logistics instead of spending more time with the groups, especially at the beginning of the class. And I think had I had more time to circulate amongst the groups and clarify their thinking then, it would have made the collaborative annotation a bit more smooth and successful. So I guess, if in a perfect world, I would, like to have that first part of the class have more of me circulating to ensure kind of they knew solidly their own. I felt like in the second part of the class, I still had to come around and clarify their thinking from the first group task.
You're done.
Cool.
Good
Thanks.
job.